Well, recent tensions between the US and North Korea have caught the interests of many in America, so much so that a new poll is suggesting that 75% of them consider North Korea to be a critical threat to their own safety. Well, TRT World went out in Washington, D.C. to find out.
I think North Korea is a huge threat to the United States, and I think we have to be very careful the way we speak to them and not create a situation that's not needed.
I think it's a pretty big threat, but part of my hesitation is I think that the United States and other countries have a lot of nerve to tell other countries what they can do. We're the only country that's ever dropped a nuclear bomb on anybody. It would be like me living next to someone, they have weapons, but they're telling me I can't have them.
Well, because they have nuclear weapons, as we've been told, and they talk about using them, it's a danger to the entire world, not just us.
At the moment, I don't think it's an imminent threat, but I think it can be very quickly. President Trump needs to really be careful what his next steps are.
Following tough talk from President Donald Trump and a subsequent threat from North Korea against the U.S. territory of Guam, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis on Wednesday issuing some of his strongest words to North Korea, telling Pyongyang that it should stop any actions that would lead to the, quote, end of its regime and the destruction of its people.
I think Americans should sleep well at night. I have no concerns about this particular rhetoric of the last few days. I think the President, again, as Commander-in-Chief, I think he felt it necessary to issue a very strong statement directly to North Korea. But I think what the President was just reaffirming is the United States has the capability to fully defend itself from any attack and defend our allies, and we will do so.
It will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
미국이 새롭게 고안해내고 감행하려는 도발적인 예방전장에는 미국 본토를 포함한 적들의 모든 아성을 성두리째 없애버리는
I'm working with Homeland Security, the Rear Admiral, and the United States to ensure our safety. And I want to reassure the people of Guam that currently there is no threat to our island.
How concerning is it that Donald Trump seems to be upping his rhetoric about some sort of action against North Korea?
Look, I think the comments are not helpful in an environment that's very tense.
The United Kingdom stands shoulder to shoulder with the United States in tackling this threat and many others. We are united in calling on the North Korean regime to halt its nuclear program.
Verfolgen die zunehmende rhetorische Eskalation rund um die koreanische Halbinsel mit größter Sorge. Die Lage ist wirklich ernst. Ein weiteres Säbelrasseln.
Evan is a senior analyst at IHS Markit. She says that peace talks are the only way out of this crisis.
Well, I think it is important to note that the fire and fury comment is somewhat using North Korea's language against itself. North Korea repeatedly talks about raining down fire on Seoul or on other targets. And I think that was an effort by US President Donald Trump to use North Korea's language against itself. I think it is definitely alarming to note the specificity of North Korea's threats. As I said, it repeatedly uses rhetoric, including raining down fire. But the change is when it gets specific, when it says we will do a nuclear test in December 2015, for example, and then carries out a nuclear test in January 2016. So again, the specificity of creating an operational plan to target Guam is alarming. However, I think looking at the past and North Korea's behavior, it has tried to manage these risks. North Korean leadership is very well aware of the fact that were it to come to conflict and were it to come to the US attacking North Korea, that it would be annihilated. I think the only approach really involves talks. The US precondition of denuclearization is essentially off the table. In July last year, following North Korea's 2 tests of intercontinental ballistic missiles, the North Korean official position on negotiations changed somewhat, and they've made it very clear that their nuclear program is not on the negotiating table. So the only way to de-escalate here is for both sides to have unofficial or official talks to come to some kind of negotiated settlement. And the problem there is that while the US says that North Korea has to, from itself, stop its production of fissile material and testing of these weapons, that won't happen.
Well, I don't think it's the goal of the American president to change the regime. It's the goal of the American president to stop North Korea from having an ICBM that can hit America with a nuclear weapon on top. He would go to war to prevent that. That's where war will be likely to occur if they continue to threaten the homeland. I hope diplomacy will work. We got 2 bad options. That is to let them get a missile to hit America or go to war to stop them. China should have 2 bad options. Deal with a nut job in your backyard or realize that there will be a war in your backyard.
How bad is this North Korea nuclear weapons threat, and is it something the United States should really be worried about?
Well, I think we should worry less about it in terms of a capable missile with a miniaturized warhead that we know works, that can strike the U.S. mainland or even Alaska. And we should actually take a page from the book of Clausewitz, who said that everything's political in the end. And I think the real threat is the fact that the long-range missile they're pursuing is a symptom of the larger problem, which is that North Korea has become a garrison state, isolated, a hermit kingdom, engaged in illicit trafficking just to stay afloat, and which constantly threatens Seoul with 8,000-piece artillery barrage at any moment. And nuclear weapons really are a symptom of their garrison mentality, where really the leader is the state is the society, and if the leader feels his legitimacy is challenged by the U.S. and by neighbors, if he feels like North Korea is in a tight place as a nation, is faltering in its basic sovereign autonomy and existence, then it may feel like it needs to lash out to defend its sovereign autonomy. And so really, to wrap it up, I think their long-range missile is a threat, but to me it's a symptom of the larger problem and the larger threat, which is North Korean instability and isolation.
Mm-hmm. Well, Xiaoming, so following up on that, if the U.S. is supposed to be concerned about this threat, so what is most concerning to China about the North Korean nuclear weapons?
North Korea has been a major concern for the Chinese government. And there's the first 2 things we have considered that as a not just concern, but even perhaps as a threat. Number 1, both countries do not have the same national interests. China wants regional security, prosperity. North Korea only wants the survival of its regime. And second, the 2 countries do not have the same ideology, like what happened during the Cold War. And talk about the recent North Korea nuclear problem, that's becoming even more concern about for the China. First, let's look at what China facing. That recently the unstable North Korean situation over the nuclear problem create a lot of instability inside China. And first, for example, Northeast China depends on some kind of trade with North Korea, and that becomes uncertain. And number two, and North Korea always create a major regional instability. For example, U.S. response to the North Korea nuclear problem by increasing military exercise with South Korea in the region and deployment of the third anti-missile system, which Chinese see that as a threat to China itself. So for today, this North Korea nuclear problem become a major problem for Chinese government to consider how to really to turn the region into the stable region which China really can benefit, not only from economic development, but also from security perspective.
Well, so you mentioned the trade relationship.